Great. Good morning, everyone. Call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 7th board meeting. Does everybody get a chance to look at them? Use a motion. And a second. Great. All in favor? Okay, those are approved. Next item is the budget request for the fiscal year 25-26. And I think Tricia and Burton are going to present that.
Thank you. So each year during its September meeting, the ILS board reviews our proposed budget request for the next fiscal year and then votes on this budget request. And I want to start with some background on the budget process and why your vote is so important. But as background, once you approve our budget request, Burton and I, with help of our colleagues, finalize the budget request documents for submission to the Division of Budget, or DOB. And DOB works with the governor's office to prepare a final executive proposed budget. And this is per the New York State Constitution, which requires the governor to seek budget requests from state agencies to develop a complete proposed budget, which is to be sent to the legislature sometime in mid-January. Now, typically in October, the budget director sends state agencies a call letter specifying a deadline for agencies to submit their proposed budgets. And this letter typically sets forth the governor's budget priorities, including fiscal priorities, including for the past several years, specifying that state agencies are to limit their budget requests. For example, not request more than what was appropriated in the current fiscal year, just as an example. This is where you come in, the board. The creation of the ILS board was intentional, and that is to provide ILS the independence called for by the 2006 Commission on the Future of Defense in New York and the American Bar Association's 10 principles of a public defense delivery system. And so in developing our proposed budget, our guiding principle or our guiding goal is improving the quality of public defense. That's what the budget is designed to do. And in reviewing and approving or voting on our proposed budget, you're also guided by that same singular goal. And so with that sort of background in mind, every once in a while, it's good to sort of reframe things. I want to turn to our proposed budget request. And you may remember from the June meeting, Burton told us that ILS's budget really is captured in two budget bills. The state operations budget bill, which is the funding needed to run our office, and the A2 localities budget bill, which is the funding that we disperse to counties into New York City. So that's how we frame our proposed budget for you. So I want to start with state operations. And again, this is what is needed to fund our office. ILS proposes a total state operations budget of $8,556,200 or $8.5 million. And this is to cover everything: salaries, fringe, operational costs, supplies, training, travel, contract services, the whole caboodle. This $8.5 million is approximately $500,000 over the current year budget appropriation. Much of this increase is the 3% cost of living increases that the state is approved for state employees for the next budget year. The rest, though, is that we are requesting two new positions. One is an organizational development specialist. Now, I've talked to the board over the past few meetings about the significant change in our office, that our office has experienced over the years with our increased responsibilities, and how this has impacted the ILS office culture, and it has times been unsettling. And from the perspective of our staff, quite honestly, some of our staff members feel that decision-making amidst all this change has been somewhat transparent and not inclusive. But simultaneously, ILS as an office is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how do we straddle those two goals? Managing the change in a way that is inclusive and transparent, so that we can promote our goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, Burton and I, in working with our staff and talking to our supervisors, really feel like we need in-house expertise to do that. And that's what this position is designed to help us do, is to help us get that in-house expertise in navigating and strategically planning for and responding to our growth and change in a way that still promotes our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals for our staff, and can help us really improve our office culture. We also, feel that this position, in addition to being that in-house expertise, can also be a place for staff to go to when they want to talk to a neutral person about concerns or suggestions for change. And so we feel this would be a very important addition to ILS at this time. And the second position we're requesting is an administrative assistant for our research unit. We have a spectacular research unit, and we have committed people with, just wonderful expertise, research expertise, but they're doing all the clerical and administrative work. And as their responsibilities have grown in terms of working with the counties and over 140 providers of public defense on obtaining data, managing those communications, and then also, organizing the data that's collected, they really need this administrative and clerical support to help them navigate the communication, help them update trainings for providers on data collection and data maintenance, and then also help organize the data collected. So that's the second position that we're requesting. So that's an overview of our state operations budget. And before talking about our 8 localities budget, I want to pause and see if board members have any questions about it.
I have a question. So when I was at the public defender's office, we were trying to hire a DE&I person for the office. And I've also had experience through bar associations where we've tried to work in hiring or contracting. And it has been very difficult for public organizations to do that because private entities can often pay more.
Right.
And there was a scarcity because so many people were going to private entities. So I guess that's my wind up to saying, is this enough to draw someone to the position?
Yeah, I mean, this is an anticipated salary, and there's flexibility in our budget if we are approved for this salary. And we can look at the state salary scales and figure out, what would be an appropriate salary for the position. So we're not tied to it, but thank you for that suggestion. I wondered the same thing, to be honest with you.
So follow up, if you find that, because you just said you're not tied to this, if you should need additional funds to compensate this person, where would that come from?
Attrition. So because this budget assumes all of our lines are full, and they're not. And this position itself wouldn't be full because we'd have time to, to fill the position. So there's sort of a safety net built in, or a buffer built into the budget.
Okay, but you wouldn't have to necessarily get rid of anyone.
No. Oh, I don't mean, I should reframe that. Unfilled positions, and actually, to be honest with you, our unfilled positions right now are not through attrition. It's just, we're still in the process of staffing up.
Okay.
So I should have responded more clearly.
No, I just wanted to make sure that in making this request, we're not going to have to make an additional request. There would be some sorts.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But the note on the salary, I think, is important, so thank you.
Chris, you had something.
I do, sir. I'd like to reiterate the concern about the salary. I think we may want to go forward to the executive with a higher proposed salary right from the gate to get somebody that's good. And I think my second comment is just, Patricia, kudos to you and your team for identifying this need. I think this is something that the public sector does very poorly, because we're always operating under restricted. Never take that kind of brave step to ask for something like this to really develop the culture within your organization. And I think with the amount of change that your agency has gone through, this is the perfect request. And I give you both credit for having the bravery to make it executive, because I think it's incredibly important.
Thank you.
Question. Of these This position, is it a contract position? Is it a time frame? Or is it open-ended? What is it?
Both positions would be personnel, so not contract, and so they would be long-term positions with the office.
Because certain positions, like where I work, that over departments, they'll sign a contract for 5 years or something
Yeah.
like that. So,
Yeah.
some people don't like to leave their job and,
Yeah, exactly. No, and we're able to offer that stability.
Thank you.
So next I'll turn to our aid to localities budget request. And so the first part of that budget request is our grants and distributions, or what's called in the budget, the ILS program. And this is the funding that's appropriated each budget year since ILS has been in existence, for our non-competitive distribution grants and some of our competitive grants. So for example, our regional immigration assistance centers. And since ILS has been in existence, this funding has remained at $81 million each year. And it's growing increasingly evident that the counties in New York City can't sustain the programs that they developed and the staff that they've hired with this flat funding. And so we're proposing a 6% COLA increase. The 6% we chose for two reasons. One, it's not inconsistent with inflation rates over the past couple of years. But two, it also recognizes that there's some catch up that needs to be done because the funding has been flat for so long. And so our request for this program is $85,860,000. The next program in your documents is the Harrell Hearing Settlement Statewide Implementation Program. And this is a change from previous budget years where we're actually consolidating the Harrell Hearing Settlement Program and the Harrell Hearing Settlement Statewide Extension Program. And we're doing this because for a couple of reasons. One, the monitoring period for the settlement is over. And so now the 5 settlement counties fall squarely under Executive Law 832-4, which is basically the statutory embodiment of the Harrell Hearing Settlement. So it makes sense to have the one program for all the counties in New York City. The second reason is administratively, it just makes it a lot easier for us to disperse and follow the funding. And it makes it easier for our partners in the budget. So what you see in this request for $273,907 is that comes from $250 million that was appropriated in this current budget year for the Harrell Hearing Settlement statewide, and the $23.9 million for the Harrell Hearing Settlement. Now, what you'll notice is that this isn't increased funding request from this current budget year. And last year, we did ask for increased funding, didn't get it. So then the question is, why aren't we asking for increased funding this year? And the reason is because we're going to be able to increase the contract amounts for the counties and New York City, in large part because of work Burton and the grants unit have done in coordination with our team from the Division of Budget and using unspent reappropriated funding in our budget. So we're going to be able to use this unspent funding, reallocate it to the counties and to New York City to increase their current contracts. So there's another mechanism by which we're getting the counties in New York City the increased funding that they need to recognize the increased costs because of inflation.
When you say unspent, what was that money initially planned to be spent for that you ultimately didn't use it for?
In both cases, it was for settlement implementation and then statewide implementation. And unspent because, the funding's appropriated in a certain year, but the work to spend the funding doesn't start, it takes a little, right? It takes time to hire and to build a program. And so there's always a gap, time between when the funding is appropriated and when it can actually be fully spent. And it's in that gap of time, that there's unspent funding. So is that
Yeah, no, I think that's a great description.
Should we think of it sort of as unclaimed in the sense that some of it has been involved and some of it's been spent not claimed?
this week we would crunch the numbers, figure it out, because we don't wanna, sort of tie up money that otherwise is already needed for claiming purposes. So again, this is where Burton and the grant team have worked very creatively on figuring out exactly what is that amount that we can say is truly unspent.
Will there be some representation in the documentation of the budget that reflects this amount so that there isn't, I don't know how it looks, so that next year it's, wait, you were able to get by with this total amount this year and
Yeah.
that amount that you're describing isn't reflected in it?
Yeah, it's not precise. There's always an amount in the final enacted budget of reappropriations. And it won't specify how much of that reappropriations will be used for, increasing these contracts. But, we can make sure that we're tracking that funding, and if the board is interested, we can specify how much.
I'm just wondering if that would be necessary so that in future years, when legislators or the governor's looking at it, they're not saying, oh, you got by with much less.
Exactly. No, and that's, I think, why we have to, no, that's a good point. And that's why we have to track it. And, make sure that exactly what you're saying, that we're not, implicitly suggesting we don't need additional funding when these programs do. So I don't know, Bert, do you want to?
I'll just note that because we are sort of initiating this plan, and we've done it in consultation with the Division of Budget, and that is who we go to when we submit our budget requests in future years, because they know our plan for this funding, we'll be able to track it, as Patricia said, but also the Division of Budget is going to be very aware of what we're using that funding for. So, when it comes time to demonstrating the need for additional appropriated funding, they'll have all the context from what we're doing with the reappropriations.
I think that's 100% valid comment. I think the issue is not whether or not the state understands, it's whether or not you're providing the executive with a political argument of why you don't need more appropriation. I think the professionals at the DOB 100% understand this. They understand the lag and how quickly counties can implement increased efforts, and that there will always be unappropriated funds against that appropriation. But it's whether you're handing the executive an argument to tell the legislature they don't really need that money. Don't worry about that. I think that's where my concern would come from.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why it's incumbent on us to make sure we're tracking it. And I think, one of the things we need to think about is, do we continue to do this? Or in future budget years, do we say this is,
Yep.
Yeah, so. The next program, I'm going to skip the parent representation program for a second, but it's the assigned counsel program. And as folks here may remember, the hourly rates for assigned counsel program attorneys, so these are the panel attorneys, private attorneys who provide representation, often in the case of conflicts, there's an institutional provider. The hourly rate for these attorneys were increased in 2023 via an amendment to County Law 722B. So these rates are set forth in the law, in state law. But under the law, counties in New York City still must fully pay for the assigned counsel costs, including the increase. And, we had long advocated for the increase and the state to fully pay for it. However, in the last two enacted budgets, the state appropriated funding to ILS to reimburse counties 50% for their expenditures due to the assigned counsel rate increases. And we were able to work with, people on having language in the budget that allowed for counties in New York City to reimburse this based on a certification process, so a more streamlined process. But as part of the certification process, we get information from counties in New York City on what they're spending. on assigned counsel rates, both for family court, for criminal court, for criminal cases, and both felonies and other types of criminal cases. And so this information that we're getting through this certification process has been really good information for us. And because of how assigned counsel vouchers work, currently, counties, the vouchers that are currently being paid out are what I call mixed vouchers. Some of them have time before the rate increase and after the rate increase, because of the amount of time it takes to do a case, and you don't submit a voucher until the case is over. And so we're getting information about, how much the rate increase is impacting counties, but we don't yet have full information. And we anticipate in 1 or 2 years with this certification process, we'll have full information. And at that point, I think we need to have the conversation about, should our request be for the full increase, asking the state to pay for the full increase. But for now, this is giving us information and providing the counties some relief for the rate increase. And again, and Burton, you might want to speak to this. We have full claiming on this pretty much, right?
Yeah, no, we've got full claiming through the first 2 fiscal quarters. Counties still have time to claim on the subsequent quarters. But what we have found is that the majority, and I would say a significant majority of counties, have found the process to be streamlined enough that shortly after a fiscal quarter closes, within 1 or 2 weeks, we are getting the certification and claims from probably around 2/3 of the counties plus New York City. And then we're able to process and turn around those for payment usually within another 1 or 2 weeks. So this has been a very, very streamlined process compared to how cost reimbursement contracts play.
Question. I wasn't completely clear whether you are saying that the 92 million is sufficient to cover 50% of the cost, the actual 50% of the cost, based on what you're seeing right now, but you think that will change in the future? Or
That's what we don't
that's
know.
different than the
Yeah.
question of whether
Yeah.
we should be asking for the full 100%. So the
Right.
92 million
92.
seems to be enough to cover what would be 50%.
Yes, and more than enough. It's been more than enough. The 92 million was an estimate, and what this information we're getting will be a better reflection of actual costs. And so we'll be in a better position to say how much state funding is needed to reimburse counties, for the full cost of the rate increase. But the 92 is more than enough for the 50.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other? And then the last program is, I know, one that's very important to everybody, and that is our request for funding for improved quality representation of parents in family court matters, or what we call parent representation or family court representation. And, we've had conversations about this over the years. While the state has made an impressive fiscal commitment to improve quality public criminal defense, the state has not made that same fiscal commitment to improving the quality of representation provided to parents in family court matters, which is the other part of public defense in New York. We've had support from the legislature, and so we've had increased funding over the past few fiscal years. So for example, in fiscal year 21-22, that was the first time we had allocated or appropriated funding just for improved quality family defense. And that was $2.5 million. In this current budget year, the appropriation is $19.5 million. So while we're grateful for that increase, the problem that we're facing is it's not enough to disperse to every county in New York City. And so we've had to disperse the funding via competitive grants, which is, burdensome on the counties and New York City and us. It delays getting money out the door and solving the problem. In 2023, we surveyed public defense providers across the state to get the information needed to determine how much funding would be needed to comply with ILS caseload standards for family court representation, which the board has previously approved. And we use caseload standard compliance as a measure of quality improvement for two reasons. One, we know you can't deliver quality representation when you're working under crushing caseloads. And two, we know that for the settlement and its extension statewide, caseload standard compliance is the major driver of the funding. It accounts for about 80% of the funding. And so that's why we decided to look at, to get a data-driven budget request, a data-driven number, we decided to look at caseload standard compliance. And what we concluded after this survey is conservatively, 150 million in state funding is needed to address the crisis of family court representation and be enough for us to disperse to every county into New York City. And so we're proposing, as we did last year, that this 150 million be phased in over 3 years. And so for this budget request, we're requesting 50 million with the goal of 150 million by fiscal year 27-28. So that's the what you see there is the request for 50 million for parent representation. So that's our aid to localities proposed budget request. So I want to pause here and see if there are any questions about that.
Could I just ask, how many counties do you have outside of New York City
57.
that are in the program?
Well, since we're responsible for all the counties in New York City, yes. Yeah, so the goal would be, right now, our funding, the competitive funding we've been able to disperse is it's 27 counties.
27.
Okay, I guess I should
Yeah.
have said
Yeah.
competitive, okay.
Yeah, and even that, like, it's not necessarily enough to address the full problem. 7 counties. So we've only been able to touch 27 counties, and even then, not necessarily the full funding they need. And so this would allow us to reach out to the whole state and give them enough funding to really address their crisis.
You say this, you need the 150, not 50, right?
The 150, yes.
And so the 50 would allow you to reach how many additional, I think you had it in the
We-
materials.
We basically do a jump start in every county. So the 50 would go to every county,
Okay.
but not, but with, as part of the first year of the
Okay.
year plan. And that's,
You'd be touching every county if you got the full 50.
yeah,
27 counties include the 5 counties of New York City?
yes. Well, it's 26 plus New York City, 26 plus New York City. Yeah, New York City, because the way we disperse funding to New York City, it goes to the mayor's office of criminal justice for all of the
Okay.
counties. So it counts as one. So one contract.
So if I understand the caseload method, cap methodology, it wouldn't account for people who are unrepresented now. Right, that is, people who are in family court by themselves, they're not counted in the caseload currently, and so
Right.
there's the 150 isn't really going to serve the full need. It'll get us a good ways, but.
Right, and I mean, I think we struggle with that, I've told our research director, I've told our director of family court representation in Burton, every time I say the 150, I sort of cringe because it really is a conservative estimate. But what it will do is get us in those counties working with them with some funding.
Right.
And I think that it'll give us a good, that process, and we've learned this through the Harrell hearing settlement and its statewide extension, that process really gives us good information. So.
So, I was thinking the same thing in terms of when Lenny and the judge were speaking, who would this actually impact? So I guess mine is more a comment. I think we need to make clear that even with the 150 that we're requesting to be distributed in, allotments, that this is not going to really resolve the need. What it's doing is, making sure that those current cases are being covered the way that they should be counseled or adequately compensated.
I mean, I frame that somewhat different. I would say that this looks at current caseloads and assumes current caseloads, that same number sort of
Yeah.
continues.
And, you know, and maybe there's some strategic, you know, polishing that can be done,
Yeah.
but my concern is, how do we take this and create a growth mindset
Mhm.
that we know is necessary,
Mhm.
right? So this is a valid request, right? Without a doubt. I don't question that at all. My concern is, because I know what I know, right? How do we then serve the goal that you stated at the beginning of this meeting for all of those individuals whose, you know, let's face it, children are being taken away.
Yeah.
Right? And those children are being impacted by these proceedings. So, and I understand you can't fight off all at once, but how do we at least, in making this request, without, I'm gonna use the expression shooting ourselves in the foot. I hate that.
Mhm.
Give me another one. But, without shooting ourselves in the foot, really signal, like, we're being really pragmatic
Yeah.
with this, and we also need to think about how we can expand, our conceptualization of this, so that it includes all of those folks that are pro se,
Yeah.
or at best, pro se,
Yeah.
right? That, because what ends up happening is there's such a defeatist attitude that they might not even go back into court.
Yeah.
Right, and children languish.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to the second part of the question, which is, you know, how do we manage the money in a forward-looking way? A big part of it will be the information that we collect from counties as they're implementing. And part of the advantage of this funding is it gives us that good foothold in counties to get that information. Because that's part of the problem, is there's a lot of unknown in family court right now. And so, you know, we've got some thoughts about how we make sure that we're always looking at it as a development. We think that the messaging, you know, if you have specific ideas for how we message this, so that everybody's there. And that we, you know, make sure this is conservative estimate, and that it will allow us to get more information that can help in, you know, fully addressing the problem in the future.
So, great solutions.
Thank you. One of my questions is, again, relying on my experience in Monroe County, we had a really difficult time staffing up for some of these family. We're just repeating each other's. But staffing up is a real challenge, especially, I think, in upstate counties or Western New York counties.
Or Western adjacent.
Or Western adjacent. We had this discussion before we started today. But anyway, I'm wondering if any thought has been given to how to build in a recruiting component. Okay, you're way ahead of me anyway.
And I should also say, our family court unit put on a consortium last week for our current grantees, and that was one of the topics, was how to build a pipeline of public defenders. And we had two wonderful public defenders, Sean Suro from Steuben County and Lindsay Quintalone from Livingston County, talking about it. I mean, Sean's like, he's going to elementary schools and in Steuben County, and he's got the long view on, you know, you've got to start really early. But some of the funding will be available for internship programs and law graduate programs. And what I really liked about Sean and Lindsay's presentation is they talked about, don't just look at law interns, you know, look at undergrad internships as well. And so, you know, so we're the nice thing about the providers that currently have the grants is, you know, that has given us a little bit of a jump start, and been able to sort of leverage some of the ideas that they've they've been having in addressing that problem. So the other thing, our intent is to be somewhat flexible with the funding and allow where they might not be able to find an attorney position. Is there another position that can alleviate the workload? Like paralegal, family advocate, social worker. So, so there will be some, thought to what does caseload relief really mean in terms of, making sure that you're addressing the problem sooner rather than later, being creative, and delivering the quality of representation.
Just to add, I completely agree with Jill, the comment I was gonna make. But I think the 5 boroughs, the big 4 upstate, and some of the more suburban counties, we're more fortunate and we still can't get attorneys right now. Our rural counterparts, but I used to work in Washington County, which is another settlement county. We employed almost the entire bar. We're county employees. And so if we talk about implementing caseload standards, similar to what's on the criminal side, in the family court side, there simply will not be enough attorneys. So I think the flexibility you're going into it with is excellent. I like trying to wrap it up 50 million at a time so we don't get into that position where the state appropriates the money and we can't spend it. I don't know if this would in any way, shape, or form be appropriate for ILS funding, but what we're trying to do is actually get the public defender's office and the social services department to work together. And the first time a CPS investigation is conducted on a family, we're bringing in intensive functional family therapy with that family unit to try to say, because what we found in doing a data analysis is by the time we get to the placement of the children in foster care or gosh forbid, a TPR hearing, we've had 15 or 16 interactions with that family. And so what we're trying to do is say the first time we interact with the family, let's bring everything to the table all at once and try to put them on a different trajectory to then avoid that case logs in family court down the road. And would there be some opportunity for a county who maybe can't just staff up with attorneys to work creatively with this funding to do more preventative services up front? I think that would be very impactful for the families, but also for the county, because I'm struggling with how we're going to be able to operationalize this.
Yeah. I want to talk to you more about that because we're trying, in a lot of counties, the providers are trying to develop those partnerships with social services. Doing that can be very helpful because you're right. Another way to reduce caseload is to narrow the door.
Yeah. And hopefully better outcomes for the family and the kids. I think is what we're finally got everybody on the same page. That's the goal of the system. So how do we do it creative?
Yeah. But this funding would allow for that pre-court, pre-petition investigation stage representation. So. There's no other.
So this is an action item, right? And I wonder what the board would think about, given the prior discussion we had about authorizing Tricia and Burton to adjust upward the salary we were discussing, let's say within a range of $50,000, up to that. I'm not saying it should be that, but to give her that discretion in the final budget. See, okay.
So the amended proposed budget would be, somebody do the math. It would be $8,606.
Well,
$8 billion.
up to that.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Up to that. Is there a motion?
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. That's passed.
And so just in New York City, the social services agencies and offenders are so adversarial toward each other.
Yeah.
And what you're proposing is something to bring them together. Good work. I think you could work in New York City. The caseload is such.
We're gonna get an update on the Western New York Regional Support Centers.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ian Harrington. I'm the attorney in charge of the Western New York Regional Support Center. Just give you a quick overview of the office and then talk about a couple other things. So there are 6 of us in the office, myself. I was a non-traditional law student. I got admitted in 2010. I worked for my father and his partner, Jim Harrington and Mark Mahoney, for about 13 years doing all criminal defense work. A lot of, most of it was assigned work, both federal and state. We have a criminal defense regional attorney for Region H is Andy Fisk. Andy also came from the assigned counsel panel in Erie County. We have a criminal court specialist named Jimmy Farrell, who's from St. Lawrence County and did a lot of family court work up there, and then moved to Buffalo about 2 years ago and was working with the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo. Carolyn Walther is an appellate attorney. She's working with our statewide appellate support center. She most recently was in the Monroe County Conflict Defender's Office doing appellate work, and she worked with a couple of different institutional providers in New York City prior to that. Alan McReynolds is our jack of all trades, data specialist, research specialist, who came from Hiscox Legal Aid in Syracuse. And finally, our administrative assistant is Jill Christ, who was at the Erie County Assigned Counsel Program for 35 years before she came to work for us. She knows everything there is to know about the Erie County Assigned Counsel Program. So our whole office has a lot of experience with public defense and this kind of work. I was the first employee in July of last year. I think Alan just hit a year. Everyone else has been on board for less than a year. So we're still finding our way a bit, but we've made a lot of progress. One of the things that we've really been concentrating on is working directly with our providers. We've been out to visit all of them multiple times. We've developed good working relationships with most of them, regular contact. And I think our presence has really made a big difference in their responsiveness to us and our ability to respond to them, identifying what issues there are and helping them implement things. Couple of things that have been touched on here are things that we're hearing. Recruitment and retention is a huge problem for everybody. And I'll talk in a minute about an initiative we have at the University of Buffalo to start to address that. A lot of them, the salary issues with the counties are a big issue. They've got funding from us to pay somebody $80,000, and the county says that position's only can be paid $65,000. So they're losing good people because of that, or not getting the opportunity to hire them. Family court is a real problem all over the place. They don't have enough attorneys. The attorneys they have way too many caseloads. Lindsay Quintalone, who Tricia just mentioned, just lost one of her family court attorneys, younger attorney, really ambitious, really wanted to do the work, but just was overwhelmed. And in his resignation letter said, I had 90-something cases and there was no end in sight. The rate crunch is a real problem, especially for the rural counties. They're getting lots of pushback from the counties about assigning cases out and forcing the PDs and the conflict defenders to keep cases that maybe otherwise should be referred out because of financial considerations. I think there's a real problem with the counties in not understanding how important this work is and what's really involved. They're thinking, we've got an attorney, what's the problem? They're not thinking about investigators, social workers, and proactive things like what you were just talking about, where let's get in with the family early on, fix problems ahead of time. Many of the counties, your county is great, but the social services are working together. In a lot of the counties, social services and the PD's office are complete odds with one another.
And I don't want to paint it in too rosy. Like there's some of me dragging it to the table and saying you will work together, and they don't particularly like it, but that's where we're trying to get them together.
I mean, they're having problems with discovery, sharing information, getting complete reports. Family court Miranda is a big issue where families are being contacted ahead of time and not take your kids away from you, so you better talk to us kind of stuff, and people are implicating themselves. And that bleeds over into criminal court too, where you might say something that now criminal charge on top of the fact that there's a family court petition. There are implementation issues to varying degrees with different places in our region. Several of our ACPs are at their shoestring of non-existent. We have multiple counties where Wyoming County, the county attorney is also the ACP provider, which is probably like 25 different reasons. We have a couple of conflict defenders who are also the ACP, inherent conflicts there. And again, they're getting real pushback from the counties about the rates and about we don't want any more assigned cases, what have you. So we've been working with them to try and help them implement different things. There are unspent funds on a lot of contracts just because they don't have the wherewithal to start implementing things. So we've been trying to work with them on a lot of those kinds of things. And an idea that came out of this, we had a meeting last fall with the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo, and we were just sort of spitballing ideas. And one of the things we sort of came up with was, what if we had a course at UB in public interest law with a very practical method. This is how this actually works, not theory, not academia, but this is how this actually works. And with an idea being, our initial idea was to have it be split between criminal and family court. A lot of different people have tried to do that in Western New York over the years and gotten nowhere with UB. So you probably know Mike Mullen, retired Wyoming County Court judge. He's been teaching out there for a couple of years. And I called him and I said, here's this idea we have. Can you help us out? And Mike is a very hard charging, go-getter guy. And within a week or two, he had me a meeting with the vice team. We had a meeting with the person who coordinates the internships at UB and the person who's in charge with placement students after they graduate. So we've met with all of them. We have all of our providers, except for two right now, who have internships programs that either existed already or that we're funding, and the two that we don't, we're pushing to do it, and try and coordinate our efforts by getting a toehold in the school, hopefully with this class, but hopefully also developing a presence to start to find students who are interested in this kind of work, steer them towards our providers in our area to do internships. Lindsay Quintalone, Tricia mentioned, has hired 3 of her interns. She's worked really hard to find, get some to work for her for a summer or occasionally during the year, and then offers them a job. They can work under practice orders and then get them going. I think there's a real problem in recruitment and retention that, we're all lawyers. This is not necessarily something we know how to do well. You create a job posting and you put it out there and then you hope for the best. I think hopefully with this UB initiative and maybe some other things, we can really be a lot more proactive about identifying law students who are interested in this work and getting into these offices. And I think there are those students. I think there's a disconnect between how do I go find a job? Everyone thinks, well, I'm going to go to New York City. But there are opportunities all over the place. All of our offices have job openings right now. Suffolk County has, they have the funding for 15 right now. And everybody we've talked to with our providers is very, very interested in participating in this initiative. Our idea was to have them 1 a week come to the class and just talk about their office for half an hour, maybe talk about a topic that's relevant for the day, but to really engage with these students to kind of put a name and a face to these offices rather than, Wyoming County, if you're not from Western New York, sounds like, Nebraska. It's and another thing Lindsay mentioned too, that if she can get people into her office and see the culture and see where it actually is and get them doing the work, they get excited and they want to stay. Whereas if it's just a job posting somewhere, they're not that interested in it. So the dean was very, very enthusiastic. So I'm going to teach this class this spring. After kicking it around for a while, we decided that trying to do criminal and family court in one semester was probably too much to bite off. So Jimmy Farrell in our office, who's our family court attorney, the plan is for him to do a family court class next fall. Same kind of idea, to get the providers in, talk about these things. The dean was, whether anything comes of this or not, I don't know, but she was talking about a clinic or a practicum or something like that, which we've been talking about at UB for a really long time, but has never come to pass. So that's a pretty exciting thing, and I hope if we could get up and running, and it's hopefully the sort of thing that if we can develop, come up with a really good plan, could replicate it elsewhere, you can take it to other schools, say, why don't you do this? This is, it's a very low cost thing to the school. They're going to pay me like $2 or $3 or something like that. So it's not like you need a couple $100,000 to start this thing. And I think too that for us to be able to get statewide, get staffed up at any time in the reasonable future, it's going to have to be younger attorneys who come in and learn this work and want to stay and want to keep doing it. I think you're going to have a very hard time finding experienced attorneys who are going to want to work for institutional providers. And then one other thing I just wanted to touch on, we have 4 of our counties are Genesee, Livingston, Orleans, and Wyoming, affectionately known as the GLOW counties. They already have a lot of intermunicipal agreements for highways and things like that. And so I should have mentioned our region, Region H, is the 8th Judicial District plus Livingston County and the 7th Judicial District. And Livingston was included because they have all these partnerships with the other counties. They are really, really hurting on the same council side of things. Livingston is one of those counties where the conflict defender is also the ACP provider, and he's getting tons of pushback from the county legislature to not send cases out. Orleans County and Genesee County currently contract with a private law office in Genesee County that does an okay job, but they're really basically taking assignments and processing vouchers. They do have a resource attorney, a guy named Ben Bonarigo, who's really enthusiastic about this, and Ben is really trying to start some initiatives and things. He and Mark Funk from Monroe County have spearheaded first ever in our region anyways, ACP meetup at the end of October. They've invited all the ACPs from the 7th and 8th Judicial District to come to a meeting in Batavia for a whole day. Really just there's an agenda, but it's really just to kind of, let's kick some ideas around, let's get to know each other, let's see what you're doing that would work for us, that we could try or what have you. And then the final county is Wyoming County, which is the county where the county attorney is the ACP provider, which is problematic for 25 different reasons. So there's a lot of enthusiasm about a regional ACP. The question really is how to do that, and it's very complicated because of the county-based system. So we've been working on 4 different models that could work, and putting together not necessarily a proposal, but maybe a suggestion of things that the counties could consider. And then once we've got that all together, we'll meet with all the counties and say, this is a real problem. Here's how we think you might be able to address this. And those models were to either continue what is already going on with the private law firm in Genesee County and have the other 2 counties that are not contracted with them do that. That's really not, I don't think, a realistic and effective long-term plan for a lot of different reasons, not least of which is if the law firm decides they don't want to do it anymore, or they want a business for some reason or whatever, the counties are going to be stuck. The more palatable solutions would be to have one of the counties create an actual ACP office, whether that was a 501c3 or a county office, and be an anchor county and contract with the other 3 counties to do their assignments, to do their vouchering, what have you. that would really be two options. One would be one of the counties actually creating an office, or a 501c3 in one of those counties that did this work. Or the other option would be Erie County, which is who I worked with, is a very large, very robust program in place. They have a ton of staff. They have a really sophisticated case management system, which none of these other providers have. They do everything through the system. The assignments go out electronically. You need an expert. You communicate through the system. The vouchering goes through the system. The vouchers go to the ACP through the system. The ACP sends the vouchers to the judges through the system, so they don't have to deal with paper and stuff like that. They just review them and approve them, or if there's a problem, decline them. They've got a full staff of investigators. They have a full staff of social workers, which none of these other counties have. So the idea would be for them to either create a new position that would be the Glow County administrator, or maybe subcontract with a different entity to be their back office and use all these resources they have. Because these other four counties are small. They just don't have the capacity to have the kind of office that Erie County does. So we are about 3/4 of the way through our sort of proposal. My counterparts are meeting with my own county actually this afternoon to talk to them about what they'd like to do and their thoughts are on it. So those are kind of our big projects at the moment, the UB and the Glow County thing, and our continued outreach. And we just finished the new budgets too for all of the counties, which was a labor of love, but was also a very good way to really dig into our counties and see what's going on and see what they need, and get to know everybody a little bit more. We're slowly building, I think, goodwill with a lot of these counties. A lot of these people too are just because of how old I am and who I know and what have you. There's a lot of people I already knew, or my dad, somebody else. There's a lot of those connections that I think a lot of the folks in Albany just aren't going to have. So we've been really able to connect with our 9 counties and get good relationships going. That was what I had. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
I had an observation, I guess, which is, I think it would be good to get into the law schools to first years, because people who are going to sign up for the courses without some kind of prompting or information are going to be people who are already interested. And I think most first years have no idea what happens in family court. And I spent Wednesday and Thursday of this week with the Association of Family Court Judges, and maybe 50 of them there. And one of the things I raised with them at dinner and we had a long discussion about was the shortage of family court attorneys and the need to try and convince law students to think about family law. And they were all eager to go to schools and, explain what they do, give sort of a little discussion about a case or two that they had and what the result was, and how, obviously there's going to be positive stories that they would tell, to try and interest the first years when they get around to being second and third years to take a family law course if the school offers one. And so if you want family court judges to go and visit along with you or at a different time, they're willing to do that. And we can help facilitate that.
Yeah, and Mike Moen, first of all, this I would be nowhere probably if Mike had his foot in the door already, but Mike's already reached out to other family court judges in our region about that, and they're very enthusiastic about this.
I'm so glad to hear that, because we've been talking about that in Onondaga County, so I'm sure your conversation with them is going to jumpstart that idea, like how do we motivate law students and tell the stories and, maybe even include some of the not so positive ones, and what's the benefit to you of doing it, so, and I volunteered to do that, but I think it's really important for them to hear from the judges, and thinking of going to our Office of Career Services and working with the county. Well, and it's really through our Access to Justice teams and subcommittees.
I'm sure even, the court attorney referees, lots of other people in the system be happy to come in and speak also.
Yeah, I mean, my own experience with you, it's now 14 years past, but They were very, very focused on academics. There was not a lot of interest in practice. What actually happens when you get out there and start practicing law? There's a lot of resistance to that. I've heard that about a lot of other schools as well, that there's a very academic bent. And they don't want, and there's also a lot of turf where we don't want some doing. If I'm the family court professor at Syracuse University, I don't want this other outside entity coming in and.
Yeah, but if you're a family court professor at Syracuse, you might be happy to have a family court benefits statements. First years to say what a great thing family practice is, because that professor can have more students.
One would think, but
Yeah.
I think the judge was to make it great.
And some schools all want something from me.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a real problem is that I don't think law students really have a good sense of what this work is and how it, especially if you're coming right from college and into law school, you've got no real world experience, you haven't really done much, or been anywhere, and the realities of this stuff is completely foreign. They do have the Court of Appeals, the Pro Bono Scholars Program, which I never heard of until a couple months ago, but yeah. You can apply in your second year to work the final semester of your third year for a not-for-profit in lieu of taking classes. And
Take the bar earlier.
you take the bar earlier and
Put it early.
ideally
We have a few.
be up, I think, by July of summer to graduate in an office somewhere.
It just, instituted that.
Yeah.
He was cheap. And it's so going strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great.
But I mean, the fact that I had no idea. I mean, this is a problem, that this is not, so these are things that I'm hoping that we can get our foot in the door and start to become a presence at UP. We can start to push.
Yeah.
Things like, let's have a judges day where judges come in and you can talk, whether it's a cocktail hour or whatever it is, or, have people in other kinds of classes just give a pitch for 5 minutes about here's this or here's that.
There are many schools would be good to try that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what, to me, is intriguing about this, is it's replicable. So.
Did we, Vince has got his hand up there.
Yeah.
All right, Ian, thanks for the report and all the good work you're doing in Western New York. And I just wanted to mention that I also teach a class out at the law school. I teach the same class that Mike Moen does. And so if you need any help at all, working with the law school, the administration, the dean for career services are good friends. So just let me know any help you need going forward on this.
Thanks. Mike was singing your praises the other day, actually, when we were talking, so.
Great.
Thank you. Tammy?
So I'm gonna lead off. For the fastball to Tammy. So Ian just spoke about the implementation work the Western New York Regional Support Center is doing, and I know the board has heard in the past from Nora Christensen, our criminal defense representation team, Lucy McCarthy in our family representation unit, and Claudia Troop about the statewide appellate support center, all doing really tremendous work on implementation. And I may be a little bit biased, with my position in the office, but the backbone in my mind to all of that is our grants unit, because that really underpins the implementation work. And our grants unit also really serve as the liaisons in a lot of ways between the folks in our office doing the implementation and the county and provider fiscal staff, who really, that's where the rubber meets the road. So I'm very pleased that we have Tammy Smith here with us today. She oversees and supervises our grants units, claim review and processing operation as an assistant grants manager too. She's here to talk to the board about many of our recent efforts to continuously improve the functioning of our grants unit. I will turn to Tammy in just a moment, but I do want to start by introducing one of the larger initiatives that we've developed and implemented over the past year and a half. And that's an updated cost manual for the counties. In sort of plain language, that is an updated guide to the fiscal backup documentation that we require counties to submit to ILS when they submit their claims for reimbursement on their contracts with us. Tammy's going to start out by speaking about how that updated cost manual has been a benefit to the counties and ILS, but I did just want to provide a quick basis for comparison to what Tammy's about to talk about. There was a period of time up until somewhat recently where ILS was asking counties, and I know Chris will probably be able to attest to some of this, was asking counties to submit really detailed backup documentation for every single expenditure that they made that they were claiming for reimbursement. And as ILS's responsibilities increased, as the amount of funding that we dispersed to the counties increased, it really became untenable and an undue burden on the counties and the providers to be able to provide that documentation, and on ILS and our staff to review that documentation because they receive all of it. There is an obligation felt to review all of it, and the grants unit for a period of time was really treating every claim like a desk audit of every single claim. And, going back to about 18 months ago, we really did our due diligence as an office and for the grants unit to speak with other agencies, speak with the comptroller's office, settle on some best practices for what we would ask the counties for that still allow us to make sure that we are adhering to sound fiscal controls, but making the claim reimbursement process much smoother. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tammy to talk about this and some of the other great initiatives that the grants unit's been undertaking.
So as of last year, this time, ILS released an updated claims policy or cost manual. It significantly streamlines the claiming process and provides updated guidance for filing and submitting claims. Just to give you an idea, recently one of my assigned counties submitted a claim for one of our grants. So that claim, based on the old way or the previous policy, might have included 130 pages of backup detail to go through. So on our end, that's a lot of paper. On their end, that's a lot of paper. But giving him an example, or that county an example, based on the new guidelines, shows him that you can, if you follow that, your claim, what you need to submit for backup into process payment could be reduced to 30 pages. So just sometimes providing that example has been helpful, but we've definitely gotten a lot of good feedback from the counties with the new policy. Another initiative we kind of implemented this year with being able to add a few new staff is full county assignments. So previously, we were kind of receiving and reviewing claims on a first in, first out basis. Maybe some counties were assigned. But now with our recent addition of another assistant grants manager too, we're now set up to have one specific point person assigned to each county. So we felt that definitely has helped us build and establish better relationships with the county. We're able to help them, we're able to gain a better understanding of the needs, concerns they have. And it allows us to have a more collaborative approach, even within our own agency with our CDR team, with our family representation unit, even our research team. And it just helps provide more clarity for the counties as well. And then one thing I've noticed with a lot of counties, which it always gives me good feedback, is that we started to see them be more proactive on the front end. That's what we want them to do, is to ask questions up front, so that it makes our process a little bit easier. We're able to process claims a lot efficiently and quicker because we resolve any issues on the front end. So that's something we've seen of late, them reaching out to ask questions regarding the claiming process. We've also implemented our probably about a year ago as well, we kind of took an inventory of all the steps that are involved in reviewing the process and planning. And we realized that a lot of the documentation we had, and we had multiple data points collecting the same information. So within the last year, several months, we've been able to reduce some of that documentation, and that has allowed us to have better monitoring and tracking of claims. We've been able to consolidate a lot of things to further streamline the process and getting rid of like unnecessary steps. As an example, we've implemented, we have one document that's kind of like our source for when we receive a claim to when it gets processed and sent for payment to our accounts payable center. Previously, we kind of did one user or one staff only access that document at one time. So we had to wait for each other to come out of it throughout the day. And we're constantly making edits in that every day. So we've taken advantage of using Microsoft SharePoint. Now we're able to each be in that document throughout the day simultaneously. I'm going to have access to it to make edits and changes. That also lets Burton and Patricia know if they need to, review those claims or anything or tell where they are in the process. They're able to see that. Another process improvement we've put in place when I first started with the agency. I've been places where it's been all paper-based, and then I've been places where it's all electronic. The grants unit over the last several months has migrated from a paper-based system in terms of even the counties submitting claims. So the counties might have previously been mailing claims in through regular mail. Now I'd say probably 80 to 90% are sending it via email electronically. So that helps us process claims a lot quicker. Surprisingly, Erie County, it's one of my assigned counties. They just recently migrated over to submitting. They have very large claims, so that's been helpful that they're submitting electronically now. And as well as even our review of the claims. So, since we're kind of in transition and migrating over, you have the option to, sometimes we'll review hard copy of claims, but also moving over to doing it electronically. That allows easier access for remote work, and just moving over to that digital electronic records allows us to save costs, space, time, and even security of documents as well. So, and also the other half of that is getting payment processed to the counties. So before, I think when I started, we were sending a lot of the paper-based claims via inter-office mail to our accounts payable center, which is probably like a mile or two from where we're located. So by implementing where we can send claims via email electronically, our accounts payable center gets claims in a matter of minutes. We have that date and time stamp. So if something gets misplaced or lost, we always have that email to track it. And then also we've noticed that maybe it might have taken a month for the county to receive payment from the time it was signed off by Patricia, left our office to get to accounts payable center. Now we've noticed that claims are getting processed to the counties electronically in probably 2 weeks or less. So that's definitely been a big improvement on our end. Just moving from paper-based to more electronic submission. And then we've also saved some space in the office as well, because a lot of our backup is stored electronically, so it allows us to access remotely. If we go out to meetings for the county, we're able to access those documents a lot easier. And then the final thing I wanted to touch on is, with my background, I kind of always say proof is always in the numbers. So the chart that Burton is handing out, it basically shows our total claims paid from 2022 to 2023 and to 2024, along with the total dollar amount. And we saw a significant increase from 2022 to 2023, but we're still seeing some increase as we move into 2024, closing that out. And these numbers are for January through August, year to date, to have a comparison. And even though this speaks volumes to the number of claims that we've been processing with a lot of the improvements and changes, the hiring of staff, what I find impressive is that our number of pending claims and review, that's kind of a number I track religiously, has been reduced significantly. So previously around this time, our pending claims might have been from 150 to maybe 180. Now, if we hit a milestone of like 50 to 60 pending claims. So I am really accomplishments that we've made in the past several months. And we've also established weekly one-on-one reviews, which is helpful for new staff and for myself and staff to review like the workload on a regular basis, same on top issues, questions, concerns. I can tell you who's assigned to what county without even looking. It's just been, I think we've been doing really well the next few months. And we definitely see it in the numbers.
I should, I just want to add, I see it as the director in the comments I get from providers and counties too. I think I'm the person at ILS here with the longest tenureship at ILS. When I started at ILS, I would often go to defender meetings, chief defender meetings. There was a lot of complaints about how long it would take to get a contract, an executed contract, and how long it would take for claims to be paid. And for a while, we had an outright bar on to be budget. It was just this constant complaining. And now I go to chief defender meetings and officials, and I hear the same thing over and over. Your grant team is, and I see it, like I sometimes will email a question that I think will take a week to respond, to get a response, and I get it in like 30 seconds. Speak to the data tracking that they're doing. What I've seen over time has really just been a very significant transformation. And what I've heard from providers, county officials, that they see it as a significant transformation. And, I concur or reiterate what Burton said. This is the backbone of the work we do. This is where from the county's perspective and the private perspective, if the money's not flowing, the work can't happen. So I just reiterate what Tammy said about being so proud of what the grant team is doing.
Yes.
That's right.
Great, yes. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for putting that.
Yeah.
Streamlining this. Great. And as a customer, thank you. Funding, you may need more.
Yeah.
Something said that about it.
Yeah. And we still have some open grants unit positions too that we're filling. And that's actually.
Sure. Ready to go to the.
We are.
What's up, face?
Absolutely.
I'll keep this relatively brief. Since the last board meeting, we've got a few new hires and promotions to announce. Elizabeth Isaacs, who was our appellate attorney in the statewide appellate support center, has been promoted to supervising appellate attorney. Nicole Manico has filled the role of assistant director of information technology. She's actually running our meeting today via WebEx, so thank you, Nicole, and we're thrilled to have you on board. And then Gracia Nowak is going to be starting on Monday as an assistant appellate attorney within our statewide support center. We also have a budget director approval pending, meaning we've made an offer, it's been accepted, it's kind of within the state process for a new special assistant for mitigation. So we hope to have them on board by the time we next meet in December, and we can do a more formal introduction then. We're recruiting for a few vacant positions currently, an assistant counsel for family representation, another appellate attorney position within our statewide appellate support center, and a criminal defense representation counsel for Region D, which is sort of the North Country Adirondacks region of the state. And we are interviewing as we speak for a grants administrator position to provide some additional administrative support to the grants unit. The other thing I'll note, we had several newly created or newly funded positions in this past year's state budget. We are in the process of working with the State Department of Civil Service to actually get those positions created so that we can post for them and fill them. And those are 3 positions that will be further bolstering our grants unit by adding in an additional auditor, an additional contract manager for some of the front end contracting work that we do, and then another assistant grants manager 1, which would be another position reporting to Tammy, working on the claims review process. So that's the ILS update.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions? Great. Unless there's other business, oh, yes.
Can I just say one thing? Judge Sparrow and I were able to attend last week the Puerto Rican Bar Association Annual Scholarship Fund Gala. And I just want to say, Judge Sparrow, you were rightly honored several times at this dinner by current attorneys, by students, and they spoke about what an impact you made to them and how you mentored them and when you taught them. So I thought that was worthy of mentioning here.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful event, and it was great. It was great.
Judge Sparrow continues to serve the people of New York and courts in so many different ways. It's really hard to count them all up.
Thanks to you.
Well, I hope I have half of your stamina.
I'll be 83.
Oh,